Happy August and welcome back to the Marriage Puzzle Podcast with Julie and Thomas Hobby. We're so excited to have you join us again as we talk about communication in this episode. And communication in marriage is one of ours, but I specifically talk a lot about this as my number one value in our marriage. I tell other couples to prioritize communication in their marriage.
Yeah, I recently heard that a marriage stands on three legs, and the three legs are communication, sex, and money. So think of a three-legged stool. If you take one of those legs away, or if one of those legs is weakened, or if one of those legs just gets completely broken off, it makes it really difficult, if not completely impossible, for that stool to still stand. So we're focusing in on the communication side of this today, but if you listen to our episode from last week, we did a book review on the book Know Yourself, Know Your Money, and that was about how your personalities work with your marriage and money, and there's a lot of communication that has to happen in money. There's also a lot of communication that probably has to happen around sex.
Yeah, we'll probably even get into that because we're gearing up, taking this month of August for communication and topics that are really just on our heart right now. But in September, we'll kick off 15 lessons and that we've learned in 15 years of marriage. And so I think sex will actually come up later. So it's not off the table, but tonight we'll focus on communication.
Could be on the table somehow.
Oh my goodness. Wow. It's a real podcast.
That was a perfect one. You couldn't let me not have that one. Perfect setup.
Keeping it real. So, but why is communication... I'm afraid of what you're going to say now with the other.
No, I'm just laughing because... I know that our parents listen to this, so that makes
Awkward.
That statement even funnier to me.
It's so important, though. I back the communication, sex, and money all the way. That's why we're talking about marriage. You can't talk about marriage and leave that part out. So, but that's why I'm afraid of all the things you're going to twist now into back to sex. But because I was going to say, why is communication hard in marriage? That's horrible. But the answer to that, in the right mind, is men and women are different. Newsflash: a man and a women get married, and we are just completely made differently. Not just the way we look, but how we're formed, just
how we're wired,
our emotions and character and personalities. And so, if men and women are different, well, then men and women. Like our goals, your goals, my goals are going to look different in communication.
Yes,
like a
as
good
they relate to good communication.
Yeah. What I think is a good conversation or a connection point, it might look different to you. So we have different goals, different expectations, and that's what we're going to be talking about today.
Yeah, totally. We in preparation for this podcast this month, we've tried to do some research on this, and we're reading some books and things like that. A week or so ago, when we were talking about this, we were getting ready to go through a DVD series based on the book The Good Fight by Doctors Les and Leslie Parrott. And if I remember correctly, earlier that day, we actually had a fight before we went through it. So
fight.
yeah,
Not a good fight.
no,
bad fight. We're not perfect.
Yeah, and so we're not just doing research, book research about how to communicate better. We're actually having to put it into practice.
Absolutely.
And so, a couple of the things that they said in the DVD series were men like the report. So communication is actually defined as the imparting or exchanging of information or news. So men like that information download. You get home and you expect to get the information download from your wife. How was work? How was the kids, etc. What are the topics? Just bullet points. Boom, boom, boom. Give me the information and let's keep going. Women like to have rapport. So they like to kind of build that connection through their communication style, and they want to talk about the feelings of everything. Men want to know, what is for dinner. Women want to talk about why I feel like having this for dinner.
Okay.
It's a very crude example just off the top of my head. It wasn't even in my notes, but like to just kind of break it down to the basics there. I think that kind of gives you an idea. And then additionally, another thing they said is men want to fix problems when they arise, and women want to explore problems. So men, when a problem comes up, we just want to figure out the solution, get it done, and again, just keep moving forward. Women want to figure out why the problem happened, what's behind it, how did this happen, and so on, and then figure out a plan on how to fix it. Men just want to get the job done. And so I think those are
It's
just
so true.
two major differences, to talk about the communication skills and styles between men and women.
Yeah. And so, if you don't get that right, there'll be conflict. And so next week we're going to be talking about basically the good fight, like conflict in marriage. But today we're going to try to stay on the good communication. And so also, because I've been reading, Dr. Les and Leslie have a lot of books out there. So we've been piling up on them. And so something that I read this week from them was the price we pay for deeper intimacy. And there's 4 stages, but they titled it that way, the price we pay for deeper intimacy. And I found that interesting because, as we were joking about just a little while ago, like I think the word intimacy is taken a lot just around sex,
Right.
if I could be so real. And it's not just about sex. It is sex, but it's not just about sex. It's intimacy actually is and should be deep communication.
Right. Yeah, I think that, again, going back to the true definition, it's defined as closely acquainted, familiar, close, private and personal, things like that. And so that's what being intimate means by definition. And, we already talked about the definition of communication, which is the exchanging of information or news. And so, those two things do pair closely together. The communication side of that, the exchanging of information or news, is basically, it can range from some very basic things in your relationship, like we were saying, what are we having for dinner, what needs to be done this weekend, who's taking the kids to school, things like that, to very deep things, why you're feeling a certain way that you're feeling, what you're going through, and things like that, what's absent for you, what am I doing that, or lacking in that's not, filling something in you. And I think that when you see that communication ranges from those more basic things to deep things, which are all necessary to talk about, you can see that how much more on the deep side that really becomes that intimate side of communication. All of that communication is how you set the expectations for your spouse and what you need from them. Again, basic to deep, that can be, from a honey-do list on the weekends, say, hey, I need you to get these 3 projects done, which, by completing those projects that your spouse assigned or asked you to do, then that helps to build the trust and helps to build that trust towards deeper communication. I'm going to pause here and give a shameless plug. I'm the host of another podcast called Redefining Manliness, and we actually talked about a similar scenario in an episode that we just launched this week that was specifically about loyalty.
Yeah.
We kind of talked about how building that trust works to be from a loyalty perspective, but it also works on a communication perspective too. You have to build that up and set the expectations for your spouse from basic things to complex scenarios. And something else that I heard around this is that quality is meeting stated expectations. So if you're
Underline the word
stated. Yeah, exactly. Because you can have the expectations in your mind,
right.
and you can still judge your spouse if they don't do what you want them to do. But if you didn't state
Yeah.
what you wanted them to do or how they were making you feel or something like that, then they're never going to be able to attain the quality that you're looking for. So, if on a basic level, if you said, I need you to take out the trash by the end of the day, and I take out the trash by the end of the day, I've met the stated expectations. But if you say, I want you to take out the trash by the end of the day, and I take it out by midnight, and you expected me to take it out by 4 p.m., that I didn't meet your expectations because you didn't state clearly the expectations. And so you need to give the details and be clear.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so all that takes communication. Don't let someone just try to read your mind. You can't.
No.
You can't read my mind. I can't read yours. So why do we play that game? Like,
Right.
It's impossible to win. So it takes effort, but it's easy to communicate. Although going back to the price we pay for deeper intimacy, it is not always easy to communicate to get to that intimacy, like the deeper communication. And so the 4 stages, it starts with, the first one is a false relationship. Like, ouch.
Yeah, that hurts to come off the top.
Like,
Yeah.
a false relationship. So you can be in these stages no matter how long, how short or how long you've been married. But a false relationship is kind of defined more in the dating stage of a relationship. So, that's where you're trying to make an impression of yourself. So the way you dress, the topics that you even talk about. So you're communicating, but you're trying to get your partner to like you. You're trying to get this person to fall in love with you. And so
it's like the peacock putting out their feathers.
Yeah. Look at me.
You gotta show the pretty side of yourself
the males,
to make
right?
sure. Yeah.
It's always funny to me.
Hey, I mean, males need all the help we can get,
Okay,
right?
yeah.
Like, let's be real.
Male peacocks are prettier than female.
That's why God gave all the animals in the animal kingdom the male side, the beauty and the extra things, like male elephants, they have the tusks, like, I'm just saying, like,
That's funny.
Males need all the help we can get because we're kind of dumb most of the time. So
that's funny. Well, let's get out of the false relationship then. And
I threw you off. That wasn't in our notes.
Well, I just not want to put men down.
I'll do it. I have a whole other podcast.
Yeah.
We do it all the time. So
manliness,
yeah,
so.
go check us out.
Oh man, that's where you guys, if you need help in that department. In the marriage department, on the false relationship, going back to like the dating, in this stage, neither of you really know each other as a real person.
Right.
At least not yet.
Yeah, it's a pretty shallow relationship. I mean, not to be negative about it, but it's just, I wrote this note that to me, that's in a situation where most of the time, I mean, we'll get to this in a little bit, but, you can probably, your marriage can be in one of these other stages, even if you're later on,
right.
But we'll get to that in a minute. But the way I wrote, the note I wrote about this was, in the dating stage, you're not living together, so you can come out of your environment into a false,
world.
False world.
You don't see my messy house.
Exactly,
put my hair and makeup together and picked out a nice outfit, and I can look presentable.
Yeah, and you're spending less time together. Even though when you're dating, you want to spend a lot of time with the other person, there's a whole lot of time you're not spending together. You're probably going back to your own homes, not being around each other, not sleeping in the same bed, so on. And so
you're just getting to know each other.
Exactly.
And that's why it sounds harsh, but it really is true. It's a false relationship. It's not there yet. You can be there and the friendship level too, trying to get to know a new friend.
Yes.
And so that's the first stage, and then you move into the second stage. So let's say you do get married, and the second stage is called chaos.
And that hurts too.
I
mean, two hard ones right off the top.
It's so real. It's so true. Like, in the chaos stage, is where you get real. But the authenticity that emerges in this stage, it actually throws the relationship off balance because you were in that false relationship and now you're trying to be real, and it's like, whoa, who did I marry? What is going on?
Yeah, you're infatuated in that early stage. You kind of have the blinders, pulled over you, and the rose-colored glasses, I guess, is how the saying would go. And then those come off when you get married.
Yeah, it's just gonna happen, and true opinions come through. You start to speak your mind. You disagree. You have conflict.
The rose-colored glasses come off, and the boxing gloves go on.
So again, we're going to talk about this stage in a full episode next week on how to fight well and how to get through conflict. Really, because I feel that this is a very scary stage to be in, but it's still very essential stage you have to go through if you're ever going to be deep communicators or even authentic. And so to me, I think most couples who get in this stage, like I said, it's a natural progression in marriage, although in fact most of the people I talk to say, there's this idea of like the first year of marriage is the honeymoon stage. But actually, like the real friends that I have, like they'll say, I never want to go back to my first year of marriage.
Right.
It was chaos. And so I think most couples will abort the relationship here. We see that even in our generation. I feel young, and like why are friends getting divorced? Like to me, that was like my parents' generation. And so now we're coming to age, and I think it's like because they get in this chaos stage and it's hard, and so they'll leave the relationship, or maybe what's even worse is they stay here. So they'll stay married, but they'll get stuck in this stage and be miserable for the rest of their life. Just like, well, this is who I'm stuck with. This is who I live with. This is our life now. And this is just how marriage is going to be. And that's actually kind of why, like, we're wanting to always learn and grow in our marriage so that it's enjoyable. I always say we have young kids right now, but I still want to like you. Like, I love you, but I still want to like you when the kids are out of the house.
Right. Yeah.
I don't want to just survive this as roommates because we have to raise these kids and then they leave and it's like we're still in chaos.
Yeah. You can very easily, in this stage, love someone and tolerate them. And that's not where you want to be. You don't want to be stuck tolerating someone. You want to be, and there may be a little bit of that in the beginning when you're first figuring things out. You're just like, I just got to get through this day. But like
I love you, but I do not want to look at you right now.
Right. We're actually doing this podcast facing back to back. I'm just kidding.
We're looking right at each other's eyes.
But yeah, I think that you can get stuck in this stage, from just tolerating the other person and not trying to grow with the other person out of this stage.
Yeah, I actually read a quote this week from Linda Miles. It says, all those, quote, and they lived happily ever after, fairy tale endings need to be changed to, quote, and they began the very hard work of making their marriage happy. Like...
Yeah, you told me that quote before we started this, and that was the first time I had heard that quote, and I was like, that kind of sucks. Like, I don't like that. I mean, it's true. I'm not gonna
happily ever after. That's what the movies do.
Happily ever after is what you hope for. That's the goal that you're striving for. But the only way you get to a goal is with the hard work, right? And so that's exactly just what this says, is you have to start the hard work to try and attain the happily ever after, and you never really arrive in any of these, like in your communication. You never get to a point where you can say, our communication is perfect. We don't have to work on that anymore.
Said no one
some-
ever.
so-
That's a quote.
Well, maybe you say that when your spouse is dead and, you're like, oh, great. I don't have to work on communication anymore. I'm good. Now I can say
So
whatever
morbid.
I want.
Oh my goodness.
Sorry, maybe too far, but I'm just saying,
Well, but yeah, I don't want to get stuck in that phase. And who wants to live in chaos? Although, like I said, it's still essential. You can't. I don't know a marriage that has skipped over this stage, nor should they skip over. Again, we'll get into that more next week of actually working through the chaos, crisis, conflict moments so that you can have good communication and have a happy marriage and not get stuck there.
Yeah, it's where the foundation is built, is in this stage.
So then they moved to the third phase, which is called emptiness. And this is where we empty ourselves of the need to change another person. So this is hard because most of us want others to do things the way we want things done. But if we can learn to empty ourselves and see our spouse differently, it's a very humbling stage, I think.
Yeah, accepting them how they are.
Exactly. And I think if this stage builds a bridge to where we all long to be, which is in the next and final stage, which is genuine relationship. So if you can get through chaos, you kind of go through this emptiness stage. Which
just to pause on emptiness for a second, when you were talking to me about this earlier, emptiness sounds like loneliness. I think that when you say emptiness, at least in my mind, it interprets as loneliness. And I don't think that's what this is saying. This isn't saying that, you've gone through all the chaos and you and your spouse are just kind of at your wit's end and now you're just lonely because you don't want to talk to each other. That's not what happens, or that's not what's supposed to happen. You go through the chaos and you build on that and you work on that and you kind of, it's like kneading dough, like you kind of make it, better, and then you get to this emptiness stage of I have no more desire. We've gone through the chaos. I have no more desire to try and change the other person to fit into my box. This is just how we are, and so it's emptying that desire, not being lonely because they didn't fit into your box. So I just want to be clear about that, because in my mind, that's kind of how those words connect to each other, and I don't want people to think that you're going to be lonely.
Yeah, once
you
you
get out of the
survive
chaos stage.
the craziness. No, not at all. And actually, like in episode 3 of our podcast, we honed in on like the 5 love languages and our Enneagram types, and even discussing our tendencies and personalities and money. And I think that's where you realize I'm not here to change you and fix you. I need to love you for who you are and accept that. And so it's almost it's calmer because you've gone through the chaos. But I hope that this is actually a shorter stage, a shorter season, that then you can quickly move to that genuine relationship, because that's where you can relax. You can be yourself in your marriage. You know that you are still accepted and loved in spite of all your imperfections. And so then your guard comes down and even wounds find healing. And to me, that's when deep communication happens. You're communicating throughout these stages, but it's not that true intimacy. It's not that deep communication.
Right. I think this is the stage where the walls come down. I think that this stage, no pun intended, but it's going to work out this way. It's kind of like 2 puzzle pieces fitting together, right? And
we like to talk about puzzles in marriage.
By the way, you're listening to the Marriage Puzzle Podcast. So the way I'm thinking of it, the way I'm picturing it is when you have emptied yourself of the desire to change me, I can now lower my walls and be genuine. I no longer have to be on the defense. When I can empty myself and no longer attempt to change you, you can lower your defense and put your walls down and be genuine with me.
That's good.
I mean, We didn't even talk about
I
that
know,
beforehand.
that was like hot off the press.
Yeah.
Very good.
If my mic wasn't attached to my desk, I'd drop it right now and just walk away.
Mic drop. I don't think you can do that. Can you do that for yourself? Mic drop.
Yeah.
Oh man. Yeah, I think going back through, since we're talking about communication in the false relationship, the first stage, I feel like that's like surface communication. So you're communicating probably a lot. You know, it's like if you're talking on the phone, if you are in separate houses and you're going to sleep, it's like, I love you. I love you too. I love you. I love you too. No, you hang up first. No, I hang up. No,
Yeah.
you first. I can't say good. Like,
And you
it's
fall asleep
just
on the phone
so
together.
adorable, but it's so surface. I'm sorry. Like, it's, you know, it's the fairy tale that you think.
Yeah.
So that's my take on that first phase. And then on the chaos, I would say the communication is intense. It's just intense. It's going to be. So if you're in that stage, don't get stuck there, but there is hope. Again, these are just my internal thoughts, not from the book or any other marriage expert, but in emptiness, I can see that actually communication maybe being more quiet because it's more of a humbling stage. You're not attacking each other, you're just accepting. So not to go to loneliness and you're not talking and you're not connecting, but I just feel, yeah, that's good because I just like it's quiet. So that makes sense. Like my mouth's closed, my ears are more open because I want to now hear your heart and the real you and not just go back and forth to win a battle. And then the last one, genuine relationship. I feel like I've said this so many times, but that's the deep communication and the intimacy that we all long for because we put in that, just like the quote said, that they began the very hard work of making their marriages happy.
Right.
And so we speak from that. Like we don't ever want to come across as marriage experts. We are trying to learn from those said marriage experts and trusting that they're still learning and growing and working through their marriage. And that's why we reference Marriage Puzzle, because our puzzle is not yet put together. We're still on this journey of turning over the pieces and navigating what, can keep us in that genuine relationship or what could set us back to the chaos.
Yeah, and I think that there's, kind of going through, we talked about chaos to emptiness to genuine, and I guess maybe some in the false section too, but, if you think of it, the foundation that you're building in communication, as in the chaos section especially, you have to you can't just tear your spouse down all the time to make them fit how you think they should fit into your box. You have to build them up some too, and so there has to be this balance. You have to deposit some good things into them, some encouragement into them, and things like that, to then be able to withdraw and take away a little bit, chip away a little bit at them. Again, not that I don't want to make it sound like you're trying to mold them into something else, but you're trying to mold your relationship to fit together. And so you have to have look at it in terms of, money. We talked about money last week. You always want to have more deposits in your bank account than withdrawals, right? That's kind of common sense. You want to have more money in your bank account than less money. And so if you think of communication from that perspective as well, you want to be, encouraging your spouse more, building them up, stating those expectations for them more, being clear so that they can live up to those expectations rather than just tearing them down when you don't communicate. Sometimes you got to look at yourself and see what's going on. But, I think, again, 2 weeks ago, we talked about the love languages, like you said, and personalities and things like that. And I think, we discussed that your strong words of affirmation, your love language, and that I have 0% words of affirmation in my love languages. And so the way I look at this deposit and withdrawal type of scenario between the two of us is, for me, it's kind of like a 1-to-1, one deposit, like one step forward, one withdrawal, one step back. It's more like going over a speed bump in communication. Whereas for someone whose words of affirmation strongly as their love language, that can be more like a roller coaster. Like one positive thing that I say to you could be like 5 deposits, and one negative thing that I say to you could be like 5 negatives, and it's
Right.
just a much bigger hill that you're going up and down, more like a roller coaster than a speed bump. I don't know if it's a good analogy or not. It makes sense to me. I mean, this is kind of the first time I've said that to you. So how do you interpret that?
Yeah, I think when it comes to communication, I think a lot of people in marriages would say, I communicate because I talk to my spouse.
Right.
And that's what you were saying earlier of like, that's maybe a lot of communication goes just to coordinate things when you're living with someone, and
Which is
especially if you have
necessary,
kids, you have to
but,
talk about
yeah.
those details. But then I think where communication can go poorly and stay in chaos, or, have the conflict that we'll work through next episode. I think because it's actually easier to say the things I don't like about you, or where you didn't meet my expectations that I probably didn't even say, but it's easier for me to communicate those. So what you're saying, those are those like withdrawals, right?
Yeah.
So I just think that's just our natural tendency, male and female, and but we're probably actually more affirming to like our friends and coworkers and stuff, and we neglect talking to our spouse on the little things. Like I said, the little things I think they turn into nagging negative things, where it would be so easy to say more positive things and we just don't even think about it.
Right.
Like we're nicer to acquaintances than we are to our spouse sometimes. And like, that's just unacceptable. So
It really is.
Examples of that would be like, if, I think they even said this on the DVD series, like if your wife looks good and you're like, oh, wow, she looks good, don't bury that thought. Tell her.
Yeah.
Like, why are you just, and then you just think of something else, like, no, I'm hungry, it's like, like speak that to her. Or, if it's, she cooked a meal and it tastes really good, say like, oh, I love this dinner, thank you so much. Like, maybe we refrain from even those positive affirmations or communication, because we could spin that then and go, well, you didn't thank me last night for dinner, so was that a bad meal?
Right.
Like what? And it's like, just
so it goes both ways. Of how they're going to react.
It goes both ways. You need to say the positive things, even the little things that you see in your spouse that you would say to a friend or a coworker or an acquaintance, but you also need to then receive those things too. So that's to me like the a different spin on like deposits and withdrawals too, is like just receive that positive and just tuck it away. And just say thank you, and don't take that positive thing and turn it to a negative.
Right. Yeah.
Silly.
Sometimes you have to take your spouse's words at face value, and then there are other times where you have to dig deeper, and you have to learn to differentiate those. In a situation like that where your spouse gives you a compliment, you probably want to take that at face value and not dig deeper into it because it's just a compliment. But in a situation where, you can sense through your spouse's body language that something's off, you ask what's wrong, they say nothing, I'm fine. That's probably a universal cue that you need to dig a little deeper. And so I think that you have to learn that technique, and it's never, again, you're never going to arrive. You're never going to be perfect at it. You're going to learn your spouse a lot better over the years, and the more you practice. I think the quote is from Vince Lombardi that, practice doesn't make perfect, but perfect practice makes perfect. Mm-hmm. And so the more you perfect your practice in the communication with your spouse, the more perfect it's going to be in real time, and so nickel's worth free advice there, I guess. But so let's try and land this plane. We want to try and give you guys some takeaways to go out of this with. We want to try to do that in as many episodes as we can. Sometimes it's just going to be content that you need to digest. Sometimes we'll have some practical tips and things that you can do. Sometimes, we'll elaborate more on a blog post and we'll send you there because that'll be an easier way for you to kind of take that information. But today, what we'd like you to do, some action steps that we'd like you to do out of this are go communicate this with your spouse. And maybe you're listening to the episode by yourself. Make sure you have your spouse listen to this episode too, and then go together and try to determine what stage of your relationship, communication relationship you're in, and what you need to do, and how and when to do that to get it to the next stage.
Yeah.
So you guys need to sit down together and just, you have to be open and honest about this. You can't just check the box and say, we're genuine, we're good. Because if you're not good.
Yeah.
You can't just do that. So you have to sit down and communicate and say, realistically, where are we at? I mean, Julie and I have been married for almost 15 years, and we could... I personally think we didn't talk about this off air, but I personally think we're in the genuine stage.
Yeah, I said I think we're there, but it'd be easy.
See, so we did talk about this. See, she's calling me out for not listening.
We did communicate. Sorry to interrupt too, but I felt we were in the genuine relationship that we would both agree, but how quickly and easily you could slip backwards.
Yeah.
And that's where it's like, well, it's not just, so, we're encouraging guys, figure out what stage you're in and what you're going to do and when and how to get to the next stage. But if you are in the genuine relationship stage, like we're identifying with currently, I wouldn't say that's a safe zone and just check it off and move on.
Right.
It's like, okay, what are we going to do to stay in this stage and cultivate our relationship and our communication? So it's still a discussion.
Yeah, you have to have the discussion. You have to figure out where you're at. You have to be honest with yourself and with your spouse about where you're at. And you guys can think you're in different spots, but you have to come to a conclusion together and say, okay, we're here. We need to move forward. Because if we're being honest, you can't be in two different sections.
No.
I mean, like I said earlier,
not in a marriage relationship.
Maybe the emptiness, genuine can go together if you're that far along, but you can't be one of you in emptiness and one of you in chaos. That's just not possible.
Right.
So make sure that you figure out together where you're at and how you can move forward. You may not be able to figure out when you can move forward, but start as quickly as possible. It's going to take some time, things like that. And maybe some ways you can do that are just practicing 10 minutes of uninterrupted and undistracted talk time with your spouse every day. Our phones are in our faces all the time. And so, just if you're not good at communicating with your spouse right now, maybe you start with 10 minutes because you can probably get through 10 minutes.
Yeah.
And it may feel like just getting through 10 minutes in the beginning until you train yourself to be better at it, and to want to have that uninterrupted time. And then it's going to naturally stretch to 15. It's going to naturally stretch to 30 and then an hour. And then you just go from there. Then you've got momentum. You just keep that rolling. So maybe you start with a 10-minute practice session of, we're both going to put our phones down. We're going to make sure the kids are in bed and actually asleep before we sit down and try to talk, so they're not getting up and distracting you or interrupting you. And then
I know you can do this because we go back to the dating. You probably did this when you were dating, and you had a meal and you looked each other in the eyes, or coffee dates, or just whatever. And now we have video chats instead of phone calls. But when you get, like I said, even in the genuine relationship, sometimes just 10 minutes, it'd be like, oh my goodness, has it been like 10 minutes yet? And it's been 1 minute. It can be awkward. Yeah. So you joked about us back to back. We're actually looking at each other's eyes right now. So it's nice that it's natural, but I can see like so many of, even just people around us, that you get so comfortable in your marriage that you lose that contact with them. And so doing this practice, 10 minutes uninterrupted, undistracted conversation, could be awkward. So if you can't even look your spouse in the eyes and have that conversation, then start with a walk next to each other, or a drive, or something that's more comfortable and natural. But the point is to just start communicating calmly and go from there.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, those are great tips. And maybe you're great at communication, but you're not great at listening. So maybe you need to examine yourself and say, hey, you know what? I'm going to practice listening to my spouse a little more. They don't talk very much. Maybe that's because I'm talking too much.
Or you interrupt.
Yeah.
I purposely try to interrupt you.
Yeah, exactly.
That annoys Thomas so
Oh,
much.
gosh.
So I have to work on that.
It's so frustrating. So frustrating.
But because that communicates to you that I'm not listening, or I'm trying to like think I know what you're going to say, so I finish your thoughts, and it's
Finish
not
each other's sandwiches.
it's not good communication. So yes, you're saying practice. You're speaking to me right now.
Yeah,
Practice
no,
listening
I'm not speaking
more.
to you. No, practice listening more. If you talk too much, practice listening more. Ask your spouse about their day. Then be quiet and listen. Again, do that undistracted and uninterrupted. You can't say, "How was your day?" and then, okay, now I'm gonna just scroll through Instagram and not pay attention.
Yeah.
That's not quality. That's not a good way to start that. So ask them and then listen undistracted. And I when I say listen, that doesn't mean just completely be silent and not say anything, but interact appropriately. Say, "Oh, well, how was that? Tell me more about that." Like engage.
Yeah.
Engaged listening is
Your spouse will
good.
know if you're genuinely listening or not.
Absolutely.
Or if you're just going through these exercises.
Absolutely. And so
That's good.
so yeah, just a couple little tips, some things that you can hopefully leave this podcast with and start practicing and put to work to get towards your happy marriage. But thanks so much for tuning in and joining us this week on the Marriage Puzzle Podcast. As you may have heard, if this is your first time listening to us, thanks for joining in. Make sure you give us a rating. If you've listened to us in the past, you might know that we release episodes weekly on Mondays. If this is your first time, then now you know that. Come back next Monday and hear us again. If this is your first time, go back and listen to some of our past ones. We've got some pretty great content that you can go back and load up on. So episodes release weekly on Mondays on your favorite podcast platform. Make sure you find us on Facebook and Instagram at Marriage Puzzle. And then, as we mentioned earlier in this podcast, we have blog posts that come out on the 1st and 15th of every month at marriagepuzzle.com, or specifically marriagepuzzle.com/blog if you want to skip straight to it. You can get there. But make sure you go and check out all of that information. Find us on all those areas. And stay in touch. We'd love to know what's going on with you, how you're doing, how you like this episode, things like that. And of course,
communicate back to us.
Yeah, communicate back to us. Give us the feedback. We will listen.
Yes.
and try and move forward. But as always, again, we episodes every week. So we look forward to seeing you back here next Monday, where together we're going to work on marriage one puzzle piece at a time. See you later.
Bye.